A baby monkey is placed in a perfectly safe environment. No predators, no danger, no challenge. Years later, when introduced to the world, he encounters an unexpected threat. His brain short-circuits. His nervous system collapses. He freezes. Across the room, a different monkey, raised with manageable challenges, small obstacles, survivable difficulties. When that same threat appears, his body responds perfectly. His nervous system stays calibrated. He assesses, decides, adapts. These aren't different species, not different genetics. The only difference is what they were asked to survive. And what we're about to show you is happening to an entire generation of human beings right now. We're creating a nation of the first monkey. Almost nobody is talking about it. This is the story of how safety became dangerous, how protection created fragility, and how we accidentally trained our young people's nervous systems to break at the first sign of real difficulty. In the 1950s, psychologist Harry Harlow conducted experiments on rhesus monkeys. He raised babies in different environments, some with mothers in natural groups, some in isolation. But a third group fascinated him most. Babies with everything they needed: warmth, food, comfort, but zero challenges, no problems to solve, no obstacles. The isolated monkeys developed serious problems, but the protected monkeys developed something unexpected. They looked healthy, physically normal, but when they encountered anything unexpected, their nervous systems catastrophically failed. A loud noise triggered panic lasting hours. Any deviation from their perfectly controlled environment produced a stress response so intense it looked like life or death danger when they were experiencing mere novelty. What Harlow was observing was profound. These monkeys had never learned they could survive difficulty. Their nervous systems had never been trained to distinguish between real danger and manageable challenge. When real life introduced the unexpected, their brains defaulted to maximum fear response. The monkeys raised with moderate challenges showed something completely different. When they encountered stress, their bodies responded appropriately. Cortisol spiked, adrenaline released, then it stopped. Their nervous system knew when to turn the stress response off. They weren't immune to fear. They were calibrated by it. In the 1960s, Martin Seligman ran experiments on dogs. He placed them in situations where they could escape electric shock by jumping a barrier. Most dogs figured it out. But Seligman also created inescapable shock conditions. When those dogs were later placed in situations where escape was possible, they didn't try. They'd learned they were helpless. But here's what nobody quotes. The dogs that had learned they could escape showed something remarkable later. They didn't panic. They explored options. They persisted. They had resilience, the memory that stress could be survived. By the 1970s, researchers saw this pattern everywhere. Rats in unpredictable environments developed better problem-solving skills. Birds that had learned to navigate threat showed better decision-making. The pattern was universal across species. There was a specific name for this: stress inoculation, like a vaccine for the nervous system. When an organism experiences manageable stress and survives it, the nervous system upgrades. The baseline for what constitutes dangerous recalibrates. The brain develops confidence in its own ability to handle difficulty. By the 1990s, neuroscientists could see this happening. They measured cortisol levels. They tracked nervous system activation. In animals stress inoculated, the prefrontal cortex stayed online during stress. In animals that hadn't, it went offline. The animal essentially lost the ability to think clearly under pressure because it had never learned it was possible. For the first time in human history, we've attempted to raise an entire generation with maximum protection and minimum challenge. We've created a psychological universe 25, a perfect world with no real obstacles. And we're seeing the same collapse pattern Calhoun documented in his mice. Since 1990, anxiety disorders in young adults have increased 300%. Panic attacks are being diagnosed in teenagers at rates unthinkable 30 years ago. College counseling centers report being overwhelmed. A student gets a B and experiences panic. A young adult makes a professional mistake and spirals for days. These aren't weak people. These are young people whose nervous systems were never trained to distinguish between manageable challenge and actual danger. They were raised in an environment that eliminated manageable challenge entirely. Every obstacle was removed. Every source of stress was preemptively handled. Every failure was prevented. Schools changed policies. Participation trophies replaced competition. Students stopped learning what failure felt like. Then they went to college, and suddenly, real consequences existed. Real competition. Real failure. And their nervous systems, which had no baseline for "this is survivable difficulty," responded like Harlow's protected monkeys. Total system shutdown. The mechanism is straightforward. In humans, the stress response system needs calibration during childhood and adolescence. A child faces a manageable challenge, learning to ride a bike, giving a presentation, losing a game, dealing with rejection. The sympathetic nervous system activates. Adrenaline and cortisol spike. The child experiences discomfort, then either succeeds or learns to cope with failure. The stress hormones recede. The parasympathetic nervous system brings the body back to baseline. This cycle activation, challenge, recovery, is how the nervous system learns its capacity. Over thousands of cycles, the nervous system becomes calibrated. It knows what real danger feels like versus manageable difficulty. The person develops resilience, actually, biological calibration. Imagine a child who's never had this experience. Parents prevent failure. Schools remove competition. Challenges are eliminated. The stress response system never practices its full cycle. It never learns to distinguish between danger and difficulty. The child grows up with a nervous system like an untested alarm system. Every stimulus is treated as maximum threat. Then, at 18 or 22, they hit real life. A job with consequences, social dynamics with stakes, a relationship requiring vulnerability. Suddenly, their alarm system is blaring at full volume because it's never learned the difference between a loud noise and actual threat. This is what we're seeing. Not weak people. People with uncalibrated nervous systems. Once a nervous system has learned it's helpless, it's remarkably hard to untrain that learning. But here's the crucial difference from Calhoun's mice. Humans can understand the mechanism and consciously choose to retrain themselves. The nervous system is plastic. It's constantly changing, learning, updating based on experience. An uncalibrated nervous system can be recalibrated. It's not permanent damage. It's learned helplessness. And learned helplessness can be unlearned. Studies show that young adults, even those with significant anxiety, can rebuild resilience. The mechanism is the same as Harlow's challenged monkeys. Exposure to manageable stress, followed by recovery. Repeated hundreds of times until the nervous system learns the pattern. Young people who deliberately pursue challenging activities, competitive sports, difficult academics, high-stakes jobs, deliberate social exposure show dramatic improvements in anxiety levels. They're literally recalibrating their nervous systems. They're teaching their bodies what the protected environment never taught them. Difficulty is survivable. This is the beautiful ones moment. Young people who look healthy, accomplished, successful on the surface, but who are internally breaking at the slightest friction. They're not actually weak. They're performing a perfect adaptation to an environment that taught them their nervous system is fragile. And just like Calhoun's experiment, the problem wasn't abundance. Young people aren't breaking because they have too much comfort. They're breaking because they never learned they could survive discomfort. Calhoun's real conclusion wasn't, "comfort kills." He said, "If the number of individuals capable of filling meaningful roles greatly exceeds the number of roles available, only violence and disruption can follow." Young people aren't being destroyed by safety. They're being destroyed by the absence of challenges that require them to grow. They're not fragile because something's wrong with them. They're fragile because nothing has ever asked anything of them. And here's what's both terrifying and hopeful. Unlike the mice, we can choose differently. We can understand the mechanism and consciously retrain ourselves. Our nervous systems are plastic. They can learn. They can adapt. They can be recalibrated. But it requires something the protected environment never provided: voluntary exposure to manageable difficulty. It requires choosing to do things that are hard. It requires learning that discomfort is not danger, that the capacity to endure is built through endurance. You're not fragile because something's wrong with you. You're fragile because you were never asked to be anything else. But that's not permanent. Your nervous system is plastic. Your resilience can be built. The question is not whether you're fragile. The question is whether you're going to stay that way. Your nervous system is a tool that adapts based on what you train it to do. Train it to avoid difficulty and it becomes fragile. Train it to overcome challenge and it becomes resilient. The choice is yours.